You don't look burned out. That's the problem. You're the one people rely on. You answer the text, you handle the crisis, you hit the deadline. If someone asked you how you're doing, you'd probably say, busy, but good. And you mean it until 3 p.m., when your chest feels tight for no clear reason, or until 8 p.m., when you're exhausted but your brain won't turn off, or until 2 a.m., when you're staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations that went completely fine, while your nervous system acts like you're under threat. And here's the part that makes you question yourself. Your labs are normal, your career is intact, your life looks functional, you're still performing. So you tell yourself, this is just stress, this is just adulthood, I just need more discipline. But what if the fact that you're still performing is the very thing hiding the problem? What if you're not failing? What if you're surviving on emergency chemistry and calling it productivity? Today, we're breaking down high functioning burnout, the version that gets praised, the version that looks successful, the version that doesn't collapse, it compensates. And if this feels uncomfortably familiar, stay with me, because once you see this pattern, you'll realize you were never lazy. You were just compensating. And if conversations like this are helpful for you, make sure you're following the show, because every week we break down the physiology behind patterns most people are told are normal. The gray zone your labs don't flag, the nervous system pieces no one explains clearly. If you want to actually understand what your body is doing, not just manage symptoms, you're going to want what's coming next. All right, let's zoom in. I see this constantly. High achievers, parents, entrepreneurs, healthcare workers, type A professionals, the ones who say, I'm fine while clenching their jaw. They don't look burned out, they look successful. That's what makes this so tricky. They're not missing work, they're not lying in bed all day, they're functioning. But zoom in, and the pattern appears. They perform well publicly. Their labs are mostly normal, but they run on caffeine and urgency. They crash in private. They need stimulation just to feel baseline. And when they try to rest, they feel flat, restless, slightly anxious. And that's not random. That's a nervous system adapted to stress. And here's the key difference. They don't collapse, they compensate. Classic burnout is obvious. High functioning burnout is much quieter. You still produce, but your nervous system is running emergency software. Your autonomic nervous system has two main modes. You have sympathetic, which is activation, and you have parasympathetic, which is repair. In a healthy system, you move between them. You activate when needed, you recover when safe. But when stress becomes chronic, whether it's deadlines, kids, emotional load, or constant notifications, your system stops fully downshifting, stays slightly activated, not panic level, just elevated. And over time, that elevation becomes normal. Waking slightly tense, that's baseline. Needing coffee to feel like yourself, that's also baseline. Your brain won't turn off at night, you assume that's just how you are. But physiologically, your brain has linked productivity with safety. So it keeps stress hormones slightly elevated to maintain that feeling of control. Cortisol nudges you forward, adrenaline sharpens focus, dopamine reinforces completion. You feel capable until you don't. Because chronic activation reallocates resources. Repair drops, digestion slows, hormone signaling shifts, blood sugar becomes more reactive. You might not even notice it at first because you're still performing. And in fact, sometimes you perform better, temporarily. You see, stress chemistry is productive. That's what makes this so seductive. You get things done, you're praised, you feel confident. But behind the scenes, your nervous system is burning through reserves. And when stimulation stops, when the meeting ends, when the house is quiet, when the email's slow, that's when the crash shows up. I'm fine all day. It's when I finally sit down that I feel awful. I hear that all the time, and I tell them it's not weakness. That is delayed nervous system processing. When you remove stimulation, your body finally has space to feel what it's been suppressing: fatigue, irritability, low mood. And here's another sign: rest that doesn't feel restorative. It feels uncomfortable because your baseline is activation. Stillness feels like something's missing. So you reach for your phone, you turn something on, you do one more task, not because you're addicted to productivity, but because stimulation prevents you from feeling that depletion underneath. And this can last for years because you're not in collapse, you're in compensation. And compensation erodes quietly until one day you wake up saying, I don't know why I'm so tired. I'm doing everything right. And that's the moment that we look under the hood. Because high functioning burnout doesn't mean you're weak. It means your body is adaptive. But adaptation is not the same thing as health. And the longer you live in this compensation pattern, the harder it becomes to remember what steady actually feels like. Now, here's where we shift the lens, because if you stop here, it's easy to turn this into a personality story. But this isn't about who you are, it's about what your physiology has adapted to. So let's reframe this. Let's dismantle something gently. This is not happening because you're overly ambitious or weak or dramatic or lazy or just stressed. And it's not because you lack discipline. It's happening because your body is doing exactly what it was designed to do: adapt. When stress becomes consistent, your body doesn't collapse, it recalibrates. If you repeatedly expose it to pressure, whether it's deadlines, responsibility, or even unpredictability, it assumes that that is the environment. So instead of shutting down, it adjusts to survive inside of it. At first, that adjustment is subtle, but over time, it becomes baseline. When your system recalibrates to chronic activation, it doesn't just affect how you feel, it shifts three core systems: cortisol rhythm, glucose regulation, and dopamine signaling. These aren't personality traits, they're chemistry loops. And the first loop we need to look at is cortisol, because if your rhythm is off, everything downstream starts compensating. Cortisol isn't the villain, it's essential. It follows a daily rhythm. In a healthy system, cortisol rises within 30 to 45 minutes of waking. That surge is the same thing that gets you moving. Then it gradually tapers throughout the day, and by night, should be low enough for melatonin to rise and repair to begin. That rhythm creates flow: morning momentum, midday steadiness, and then an evening wind down. But in high functioning burnout, the rhythm doesn't disappear, it shifts. What I often see looks like this: a blunted morning rise, afternoon compensation spike, evening second wind. You might wake up heavy. Coffee becomes the artificial surge. By mid-afternoon, your system senses demand and bumps cortisol again. You get that 3 p.m. push-through mode, but then later, when your body should be tapering, your brain gets sharp. You get ideas. Maybe you feel clarity or energy. You think, maybe I'm just a night person. But biologically, your system is mistimed. Your activation is delayed. Your recovery is shortened. And here's where caffeine sensitivity often shows up. You might say, I used to love coffee. Now one cup makes me jittery. And that's not random. When stress chemistry stays elevated long enough, your nervous system becomes reactive. Caffeine increases adrenaline. So if your baseline activation is already high, caffeine doesn't energize you, it overshoots you. You might notice jitters or buzzing or chest tightness. And what once felt smooth now feels sharp. And that shift is a clue. It tells you your system has lost flexibility. And flexibility is what healthy rhythm depends on. You can live in this distortion for a long time because you're still functioning. But underneath, your nervous system is running on altered timing. And cortisol doesn't operate alone. You see, when rhythm shifts, fuel shifts too. Let's talk about blood sugar. Your brain runs on glucose, and it does not store backup fuel. It needs a steady supply. Not perfection, just steady. And this is where high functioning burnout gets sneaky, because high performers are often terrible at fueling. They skip breakfast, they drink coffee instead, they power through meetings, they eat late, they undereat protein. It feels efficient, but physiologically, it's creating instability. When you delay eating, especially in a stress-adapted system, blood sugar begins to dip. Not dramatically, just enough. And when blood sugar drops, your brain interprets that as threat. From a survival standpoint, low glucose equals danger. So your body compensates. It releases cortisol. It releases adrenaline. Those mobilize stored glucose. And you might notice you feel sharper, more focused, a little wired. And that surge, it feels productive. But it isn't. It's stress chemistry stabilizing unstable fuel. You push through, but then when the mobilized glucose gets used up, you notice there's a drop. And now you're foggy, you're irritable, you're flat, you're tired in a way that feels disproportionate. And because you don't interpret it as a fuel issue, you reach for stimulation. It might be sugar or caffeine or another task. And the loop repeats. Now here's where labs confuse people. A1C measures average blood sugar over 3 months. And the key word there is average. And your nervous system doesn't react to average. It reacts to swings. You can have a completely normal A1C and still ride subtle spikes and dips all day long. A small rise here, small drop there, a compensatory surge, followed by a mini crash. And repeated enough times, volatility becomes baseline. And when instability becomes baseline, you don't recognize it as instability anymore. You call it just how I function. But your system wasn't built for volatility. It was built for rhythm. Predictable meals, adequate protein, stable fuel, gentle tapering activation. And when you stack chronic stress or caffeine-first mornings or long gaps between meals or low protein, you create subtle metabolic instability. And metabolic instability layered on top of chronic activation keeps your nervous system from ever fully settling. Not because you're dramatic, because your fuel isn't steady. And when fuel and stress chemistry stay unstable long enough, your motivation system adapts too. Now we need to talk about dopamine, because this is where achievement wiring gets reinforced. Dopamine isn't just pleasure, it's pursuit, it's anticipation, the drive to move forward, the spark that says, do that, finish that, chase that. And here's the part that most people misunderstand. Dopamine spikes in the pursuit, not the reward. It's the check mark, the notification, the deadline, the next step. Under chronic stress, that signaling shifts. When cortisol and adrenaline stay elevated, your brain recalibrates what feels stimulating. Your baseline moves. What used to feel satisfying now feels neutral. What used to feel neutral now feels flat. So you start needing more input just to feel normal, more urgency, more stimulation, more wins. Not to feel exceptional, but to just feel regulated. And that's the quiet shift. You're not chasing achievement, you're chasing baseline stability. A slow Saturday feels off. Vacation feels restless. Silence feels loud. Because your nervous system has linked motion with safety. Motion regulates you. Stillness exposes the drop. So you stack stimulation. The coffee, the deadlines, the multitasking, the scrolling, the constant input. And it works. Briefly. But even dopamine receptors adapt. And the more stimulation you layer in, the less sensitive the system becomes. You need more to feel the same effect, which creates the loop where you feel flat, you add stimulation, a brief lift, your tolerance rises, you need more, and you repeat the vicious cycle all over again. And because you're high functioning, it doesn't even look chaotic. It looks driven or organized or capable until you try to slow down. And then you realize something uncomfortable. When you try to rest, truly rest, it doesn't even feel good. It feels agitating. You sit down and within minutes you reach for something. Not because you lack discipline, but because your nervous system hasn't practiced safety without momentum. Your brain has forgotten how to generate satisfaction from low stimulation states. Now layer this on top of this distorted cortisol rhythm and the unstable glucose, and you end up with a system that needs stimulation to feel clear, needs urgency to feel focused, needs motion to feel steady. And that is why high-functioning burnout is so hard to spot, because it doesn't look like collapse, it looks like drive. Until one day, you try to slow down, and you realize you don't know how. And here's where it gets deeper, because eventually this stops being about hormones. It becomes about identity. You become the reliable one, the strong one, the calm one, the one who handles it. And that identity gets reinforced. Every time you push through when you're tired, every time you stay composed when things feel chaotic, every time someone says, I don't know how you do it, your brain logs that as proof that performance equals stability. You see, your nervous system is constantly scanning for safety. And if handling everything prevents chaos, or if staying productive prevents conflict, or if being steady keeps the peace, your system learns something quietly powerful. Output maintains control. Control maintains safety. And over time, that stops being a strategy. It becomes a self-concept. And here's the quiet cost. When identity fuses with performance, slowing down doesn't just feel inconvenient, it feels destabilizing. If you're not the reliable one, if you're not the productive one, if you're not the steady, strong one, who are you? That question isn't dramatic, it's neurological. Neurons that fire together wire together. And if output is repeatedly paired with safety or validation, your brain builds that association deeply. So when you try to rest, it doesn't just feel physically uncomfortable, it feels wrong. You sit still and your system whispers, you should be doing something. You're falling behind. And that voice, it isn't a character flaw, it's conditioning. Especially if earlier in life, responsibility equaled safety or achievement earned approval. Your nervous system doesn't forget those pairings, it just refines them. And now you layer that on top of all of the things we've talked about, and you don't just prefer performance, you depend on it, not consciously, but biologically. Stopping feels exposed because motion has become your regulator. And here's the key distinction. That pattern is adaptive, it worked. But what worked once doesn't always scale. What stabilized you then may be costing you steadiness now. And once you see that, you stop judging yourself and you start updating the pattern. Identity built on output isn't wrong, it's just incomplete. Now here's the part that makes people doubt themselves. Because when you finally look into this, your labs often say, everything's fine. And let's talk about why. Most standard labs are designed to detect disease. They are not designed to detect dysregulation. High-functioning burnout lives in that gap. It's not pathological, but it's also not optimal either. It's just off rhythm. Let's start with cortisol. Cortisol is rhythmic, right? It rises in the morning, it tapers through the day, and it falls at night. And a single morning blood draw tells you just one moment in time. It does not tell you what happened at 3 p.m. or 10 p.m. or 2 a.m. So you can have normal cortisol and still feel wired at night and heavy in the morning. And now A1C. If you remember, A1C measures average blood sugar over 3 months. And again, average. But your nervous system, it reacts to swings. You can have that perfectly normal A1C, and you can still be experiencing those subtle glucose spikes and dips. Volatility doesn't show up in an average. Next is thyroid. TSH may be within range, but TSH is a signaling hormone. It tells the thyroid what to do. It doesn't tell you how efficiently your cells are responding. Free T3, which is your active hormone, that might technically be normal, but it's low for you. Under chronic stress, the body often downshifts metabolism slightly, not as failure, but as conservation. And you might experience that as subtle fatigue, lower motivation, feeling colder than you used to. And then there's ferritin. Your ferritin might be 30 or 40, it's technically normal, but ferritin reflects iron storage, which supports oxygen delivery, mitochondrial energy, and even neurotransmitter production. You may not be anemic, but you may not be resilient either, and there's a big difference there. And here's the shift. Labs measure levels, but burnout is about rhythm. And when you understand that, you stop chasing diagnoses. You start restoring regulation. So what do you actually do with that? How do you rebuild rhythm without blowing up your life? Let's make this practical. Now let's talk about what actually works. It's not about quitting your job and moving to Bali. It's about restoring biological anchors. High-functioning burnout is a rhythm issue, right? So the solution has to be rhythmic. When someone comes into my office with this pattern, we don't start with advanced protocols. We start with stability because your nervous system responds to predictability. Here's where I begin. First, Morning fuel within 60 to 90 minutes. Not because breakfast is magical, but because your brain needs fuel to stabilize cortisol. When you eat, especially protein, you reduce unnecessary stress signaling. You're basically telling your body we're resourced, and that alone can soften the entire day. Number 2, protein at every meal. This isn't about macros, it's about steadiness. Protein slows glucose spikes. It also supports neurotransmitter production and reduces volatility. Our biggest goal here is to prevent swings. We're not chasing performance. Number 3, no caffeine before food. Caffeine increases adrenaline. If you drink it into an empty system, you amplify activation before stabilizing fuel. That's why coffee feels sharp instead of smooth. After food, completely different experience. Again, we're not eliminating caffeine here, we're just repositioning it because timing matters. Number 4, 10 minutes of morning light. Morning light anchors your circadian rhythm. It signals your brain this is wake up time. And that alone improves daytime alertness and also helps melatonin release at night. You don't need a gigantic ritual, you just need some light in your eyes. Number 5, electrolytes mid-morning. Chronic stress increases fluid and electrolyte demand. Low sodium or potassium can feel like lightheadedness, fog, subtle anxiety, and sometimes what feels psychological is actually physiological. A simple electrolyte mix can stabilize that midday dip. Simple and effective. Number 6, structured wind down at night. Not scrolling until you pass out, but an intentional taper. Dim the lights, lower stimulation, slow your pace. If you're running at full speed until 10:58 p.m. and then expect to sleep at 11, that's just not realistic. You see, transition teaches your body how to downshift. And here's what matters most. You don't fix high-functioning burnout with intensity, you fix it with consistency. Small anchors repeated daily. Your system adapted to overactivation. It can readapt back to stability, but it needs repetition. When anchors hold, morning feels clear, afternoons feel steadier, evenings feel calmer, and you notice your sleep deepens. You don't become less capable, you just become less brittle. And when that shift starts happening, this is what I see. I've watched this pattern reverse, not overnight, not dramatically, but steadily. And the shift is subtle at first. Morning doesn't feel like Dragon Force anymore. You wake up and you're not bracing. There's space between waking and urgency. Afternoons stop feeling like survival. You don't need that 3 p.m. rescue. Energy becomes even, predictable, calm. And that steadiness can feel unfamiliar at first. Because when you're used to adrenaline, calm feels quiet. But then something changes. Evenings taper naturally. Sleep deepens. It's not perfect, but it's restorative. And maybe the most important shift, rest stops feeling threatening. You sit down and you don't immediately reach for something. You don't feel behind. You feel settled. In high-functioning burnout, urgency feels like energy. Deadline energy. Crisis energy. Last-minute energy. So people worry. If I stop pushing, am I going to lose my edge? But here's what I've seen over and over. You absolutely don't lose your edge. You just lose the brittleness. You still show up. You still lead. You still execute. But you're not running on fumes. You're operating from capacity. And that makes all the difference. Compensation is reactive. Capacity is sustainable. Compensation burns fast. Capacity burns long. You don't become less driven. You become more regulated, clearer, more patient, more resilient. Not because you optimized harder, but because you stabilized deeper. High-functioning burnout, it convinces you that slowing down will cost you everything. But rebuilding rhythm does not shrink your life. It expands your margin. And if you're listening thinking, that's exactly what I want, good. Because I made something for you. If you're the strong one, or the reliable one, or the one who handles it, you don't need another productivity hack. You need stability. I put together a free guide called the High Functioning Burnout Reset, so you can move from compensation to capacity. You can grab it through the link in the show notes. And remember, start small, start consistent, start rebuilding, because you don't have to earn rest. If this episode felt personal, share it with the strong one in your life, because they're probably carrying more than they let on. You're not lazy, you're not broken, you adapted. And adaptation can be redirected. All right, before you head out, I just want to say thank you, truly. I know your time matters, And the fact that you're willing to spend 30 minutes or more learning about your body, your nervous system, your patterns, that's not small. So if this episode helped you see yourself a little more clearly or understand your physiology a little differently, there are a couple really simple ways that you can support the show. If you're watching on YouTube, hit subscribe. That helps this message reach more people who are quietly running on compensation and don't even realize it yet. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, follow the show so you don't miss what's coming next. And if you feel like it deserves it, leave a 5-star review. Those reviews genuinely help more than you know. You can also now leave comments on both platforms, which I love. So if you have questions or reflections or topics you want me to break down next, drop those there. And if you want to make sure I actually see it, the best place is the YouTube comments or a DM on Instagram. I read them, I think about them, and a lot of episodes come directly from what you guys ask. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this work, and I will see you in the next episode.